When the mood soured, the security guards finally showed their hand. He tore off his tie, leering. "Someone doesn't like you and paid us to teach you a lesson. Do what we say and we'll be gentle, okay?" They closed in on Carly. Carly gripped the iron rod, Knuckles' white eyes tracking them. The first one lunged. She snapped her arms and struck clean and fast, cracking him across the head. Blood sheeted down his face, bright and shocking. But Carly knew the body. She'd chosen a spot that would bleed and hurt, but not kill. She lifted her chin. "If you try to harm me, we might as well die together." The burly man faltered, thrown by the force of a girl who looked harmless a minute ago. The other two glanced at each other, rattled by their groaning friend. The leader had money on the line. He bared his teeth. "What are you afraid of?" "She's just a chick." "We get scared off by her. How are we supposed to survive out there?" The two thugs yanked electric batons from their waistbands. The crackle filled the air. Carly's pulse spiked. She couldn't take both at once. Odds were bad. They charged together. Carly fought back, but the blows kept coming. One baton knocked the iron rod from her grip. Her hands went numb from the shocks. No mercy. One thug drove a fist into her stomach. Air blasted out of her and she hit the floor. Rough hands seized her wrists, pinning her. "Why are you bastards trying to harm me? Did Lance send you?" Carly strained against them, voice raw. "Let go of me. What do you want?" The guards decided to ride the lie. Mr. Hardwick was too powerful. Surely she'd never dare go after him. "You guessed right, miss." The leader sneered. "Mr. Hardwick doesn't like you. He sent us to teach you a lesson, so you remember not to mess with the wrong people." Rage flared through Carly. She thrashed against their grip. "What did I do to offend him? Is this really necessary?" "Reason?" He smiled, ugly and mean. "He just doesn't like the sight of you. That's enough." He yanked at her uniform. Stitches popped, fabric tearing, her bra exposed. Their eyes went predatory, something feral stirring as they stared. One guard couldn't hold it in. "She's so pretty. Boss, can I go first?" The leader kicked him aside without a blink. "No, I've never seen anyone this beautiful. I'm first. You keep watch. Make sure no one comes." The kicked man staggered back, then slunk to the side, glaring as the other moved in on Carly. The leader pawed at her, binding her wrist with his tie. He flipped her, hauling at the oversized uniform. His eyes glittered with sick excitement. He leaned in, about to make his move. "Add me to this little party." The voice cut through the room, low and cold. The air itself seemed to drop. The leader froze. He turned and met Lance's indifferent, icy stare. A shudder ripped through him. Lance watched him with a thin sneer. If looks could kill, the man would have died 1,000 times. Outside the doorway, the one posted as lookout already lay groaning, face down in blood. Aaron stood over him, disgust twisting his mouth. The audacity to pull this on Lance's turf. Aaron snapped at the leader, voice like a lash. "You've got guts, using Mr. Hardwick's name to kidnap a girl. Aren't you afraid of being caught? Don't you know what awaits you when you are?" 3 insignificant lackeys dared to throw Mr. Hardwick's name around so they could lay hands on Carly. Who the hell did they think they were? The other 2 men toppled to their knees, foreheads nearly touching the floor. Mr. Hardwick, spare us, we beg you. We only wanted to teach her a lesson. We couldn't stand her. A bodyguard snarled, You bastards! How dare you hurt Mr. Hardwick's people? Carly slowly rose from the ground. Dirt clung to her clothes. Her breath shook. Thank God it wasn't Lance targeting her this time. Otherwise, she would have been assaulted for sure. The kneeling guards bobbed their heads frantically. We know we were wrong, Mr. Hardwick. Please forgive us. We'll start over. We won't do this again. Their foreheads were slick with blood from bowing, but they didn't care. All that mattered now was Lance's forgiveness. Lance glanced at Carly. His men, quick on the uptake, hurried forward, undoing her bindings. They turned to her, faces stiff with fear and shame. Miss Chambers, we were wrong. We offended you. Please give us a chance to start over. A purplish-blue welt ringed Carly's fair wrist. Her hair was a mess, her body smeared with grime. She looked wrecked, yet her eyes sparked like flint. She raised her hand and slapped the guard. The crack echoed. Half his face swelled red in seconds. She wasn't someone to trifle with. Didn't he say he was going to teach her a lesson? What right did they have to harm her so recklessly? Did they think she was an object? Something to insult and toy with? Moments ago, on the brink of being assaulted, fury had roared up in her so hot she could have skinned them alive. A slap was far too lenient. Lance watched her, a glint in his eye, admiring that vengeful streak. Why should she repay malice with kindness? And they thought a simple apology could settle this? Over her dead body. Carly braced a hand against the wall and turned to Lance. Gratitude caught in her throat, but resentment burned beneath it. She loathed her own weakness, how it made her pray for men like these. And she hated Lance for assigning her to the cleaning staff, for leaving her with no right to bargain. Now everyone saw her as something pitiable. That was on him. The grudge scorched hot in her chest. Lance's voice was flat. How are you going to deal with them? The kneeling guard dared a breath of relief. This woman looked softer than the cold-hearted Mr. Hardwick. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to live. Carly's face had the calm of a demon. The hospital's lab needs test subjects, she said evenly. I've been developing a new drug. It's still in the experimental stage. I'll use them to try it. Lance's mouth curved, impressed. Good. Let them make up for their misdeeds by contributing to medical research. Carly didn't blink. I also need to perform a new type of brain surgery. They'll be the first group of subjects. There's no precedent in the country yet. The guards trembled. Miss Chambers. No, Dr. Chambers, please, we were wrong. We'll never do it again. Please, spare us. Not a chance. Carly stared down at them, unflinching. They were only repentant because Lance was here. Without him, they would have shown her no mercy. If Lance hadn't come, would these guards have spared her if she begged? She let a cold smile curl her lips. What are you so afraid of? It's just an operation. The survival rate's still high. Remember, grit your teeth and persevere. Otherwise, if it fails, we'll just do it again. Same steps. One man tried to lunge forward, babbling, but she kicked him back down, cutting off his plea. He kept pleading anyway, words dissolving into sobs until Lance flicked a hand. His bodyguard stepped in, clamped a palm over the man's mouth, and dragged him away. Carly watched them go, their eyes wide with despair. Good. Let them shake with it day after day until fear ate them from the inside out. A suit jacket landed across her shoulders, heavy and warm. Lance's voice came, clipped with disapproval. Put on some clothes. Don't embarrass yourself. She looked down at the fabric, silk, fine enough to whisper under her fingers. Of course. Lance's money could buy the kind of luxury she couldn't even picture. Who was she to wear it?
The heroine is currently facing a difficult situation and needs your support. Please leave your words of encouragement for her in the comments section.
Carly returned the clothes without hesitation and bowed to Lance. Thank you for saving me today. I hope you'll stop targeting me. I'm just an ordinary worker, nothing compared to you powerful people. If you want to have fun, please find another way. Lance didn't take the clothes. She stepped closer and dressed him herself, rising onto her tiptoes to reach his shoulders. Up close, his height swallowed her shadow. He looked down, one glance, and the damage on her skin told him everything. A cut slashed across her wrist. Scratches scored her neck. Her clothes, once fine, were now torn and filthy. Still, her chin stayed lifted as she placed the garments on him. She took 2 steps back, keeping a careful distance. Lance was moved by her refusal to yield. Wait, I have something to say. Exasperation flared behind her eyes. Really? In this state, did he still want to torment her? She swallowed her temper, turned, and kept her voice cautious. Is there anything else you need, Mr. Hardwick? I have a lot of work to do this afternoon and no time for lectures. Don't worry, I'll clean the entire hospital before I leave. He frowned at her stubbornness. If only she knew when to yield and ask for mercy. He might have reconsidered and restored her position. Aaron watched from the side, thinking she was too stubborn, too ignorant. The boss was already showing signs of leniency, and she still didn't see it. Not even a word of gratitude. Not even a word of gratitude. Aren't you even a little curious about who sent those guards? Lance asked. Carly let out a dry, self-mocking breath. Maybe someone noticed you don't like me, Mr. Hardwick, and sent those guards to torment me. Do you think you're a pushover? He shot back. Does it even matter? One word from you and my fate changes, she replied. To Lance, she had always seemed like one of the lowly, someone who would gnaw and bow, too afraid to speak out of turn. Today, she put her hands on 3 security guards. She would never have dared if not for the fury boiling in her veins. Christy, Lance said. Carly's eyes widened. Mr. Hardwick, are you saying Christy bribed those security guards to attack me? He nodded. The pieces clicked. 6 years ago, when she still belonged to the Chambers family, Christy had made her life a misery. First day seeing her again after all these years, and Christy went right back to her old games. But Carly wasn't the same girl anymore. Thank you for the warning, Mr. Hardwick, she said, sincere despite the ache in her throat. Lance inclined his head and gestured to Aaron. This may be useful to you, he said. Carly lowered her gaze to the document Aaron handed over. A pregnancy report. Christy's name. The results were clear. Christy had never been pregnant. So she'd been deceiving Caden, planning to trap him into marriage, huh? Mr. Hardwick, how did you get this? And why did you tell me? Carly demanded. You'll understand my intentions when you're smarter, Lance said, voice cool, and turned away. Aaron returned a moment later and pressed a white coat into Carly's hands without a word, then followed his boss. Carly tightened her grip on the report until the paper crinkled. Fine. It was time to teach Christy a lesson. If she didn't draw a line now, Christy would only get worse. She slid into the white coat and went back to work, finishing every remaining task, even as exhaustion dragged at her limbs. After her shift, Carly rushed to pick up her children. Her spirit felt heavy, battered by the day. I'm deeply sorry, Miss Ringel, she said, contrite. I've taken up your precious time again. I'll arrive earlier in the future to avoid any more inconvenience. Miss Raynell took in Carly's hurried, wounded state and felt a pang of compassion for a mother carrying it all on her own with 2 small children waiting. Mrs. Chambers, you don't have to be so polite. If you ever need help, just let me know in advance. I live nearby. You can pick up the kids after you finish whatever you need to do, Miss Raynell said softly. Carly looked at her gratefully. In this unfamiliar place, the warmth felt new, unexpected. Maybe the kindergarten really was worth the fees. Thank you very much, Miss Raynell. Carly smiled. I'll adjust my work schedule soon, so I won't bother you. It already felt embarrassing to trouble others. She could never take Miss Raynell's kindness for granted. Miss Raynell seemed to understand and didn't press. After praising the children for a while, she said goodbye to Carly. After the 3 of them returned home, Carly headed straight for the kitchen and started cooking. Shane watched her, alert. His mother kept drifting off like her mind was somewhere else. He wandered in and asked lightly, Mom, are you being bullied outside? Carly froze, shocked. How did he pick up on that? Not wanting him to worry, she pasted on a smile. Oh no. I just accidentally scratched myself at work, that's all. No one is bullying me. If you're not going to say it, I'll go to the hospital tomorrow and ask everyone. Baby, can't you be a little more tactful? Carly sighed. You're putting a lot of pressure on me. Maybe she was overthinking it, but that overbearing tone, why did it feel so familiar? Had Lance pushed her so far that even her son's firmness cast his shadow? God, was she seeing the devil in her child? Shane's brows knit. I'm sorry, Mom. It's just outside. You're always so strong. You never admit defeat. But today you're hurt and you've been distracted all day. So I thought someone bullied you. Who dares bully my mother? I'll teach them a lesson. He was only 5, yet he planted his feet and vowed to protect her. Warmth pooled in Carly's chest. She ruffled his hair and smiled. It's my boss. He doesn't know what I can do yet, so he wants to train me. It's fine. I can hold on. She expected him to let it slide after that. She only wanted him to grow up happy. But Shane, sensible as ever, felt quiet, thinking hard. He could tell how tired she'd been lately. He wanted to share her burdens. Mom, I'll punish that bad guy for you. I'll help you vent your anger. Okay. When you grow up and you're capable, you'll definitely be able to protect me. I can do it now, Shane said, firm as a little soldier. He sounded childish, and Carly didn't take it to heart. She soothed him for a bit, then turned back to the stove. Shane wasn't joking. He slipped into the bedroom, turned on the computer, and typed with quick, small fingers. He searched for information on Peace Point Hospital. He scanned the page, thought for a moment, then a spark lit in his eyes. A little later, Carly came out with steaming bowls. Kids, dinner's ready. I made noodles with ribs. First come, first served. The two children ran to wash their hands. When they sat down, the fragrant pork rib noodles made their mouths water. Sherry was practically drooling, but the first rib she picked up landed in her mother's bowl. Shane did the same, quiet and deliberate. Carly's heart swelled. With these two little angels by her side, she could endure anything. After the children went to bed, she sat on the edge of her own and checked her phone for updates. The day before, she had asked a foreman to call him. She'd lined up a physically demanding job for the children's father. With his build, if he could stand the hardship, he ought to be able to make money. She just wasn't sure he'd put his heart into it. The more Carly thought about it, the more aggrieved she felt. She'd been worrying about that bastard, and there was still no word from him at all. Just as she sank into that thought, her phone buzzed. A bank transfer. There was even a note attached, hard day's work. Working on a construction site wasn't easy. That little gangster had a responsible streak after all. He transferred his entire day's wages to her. Kind of him and foolish. She typed back, all business. Keep it up. Be at work at dawn tomorrow. Make more money to pay off the debt. I'm watching you. Don't slack off. Carly was ruthless. Money first. She didn't even ask if he was having a hard time. On the other end, a smile tugged at Lance's mouth. He had no objection to working to pay what he owed. The pity was for Leith. His hands were cramping from the labor. He glanced at Leith's dust-streaked face. Sweat had carved muddy tracks down his forehead. As one of Lance's assistants, Leith wasn't as sharp as Aaron, but his professionalism was top-notch. Now he'd been reduced to hauling bricks at a construction site. His body wasn't built for it. Worse, every penny of that hard-earned cash had gone straight to Carly. Leith shot Mr. Hardwick a wounded look, begging silently for him to shut down this ridiculous demand. But Mr. Hardwick's curt reply made him want to quit on the spot. Lance's eyes cooled. It seems you're not willing. Leith puffed out his chest and lifted his chin, voice turning fawning. Of course I am. Mr. Hardwick saved my life. I wouldn't hesitate to go up mountains of blades or even the sea of death for you. Lance nodded, satisfied, and started tapping out another message. As he passed, he clapped Leith's shoulder. Keep it up and don't slack off. I won't let Mr. Hardwick down. Aaron, watching, felt genuinely grateful he'd been glued to Mr. Hardwick's side all this time. Otherwise, he'd be the one moving bricks next. Early the next morning, Carly got up half an hour early, hustled the two kids through washing up, and sent them off to school. Fortunately, they were sensible. No fussing, no rolling in the blankets. Kindergarten drop-off was easy. By the time Carly rushed into the hospital, the other cleaner had already pitched in and done some of her work. After all, she'd covered the entire hospital alone the day before. She didn't run into Lance all day. Freedom, no one glaring at her like a surveillance camera. God, that felt good. If only she never had to see Lance again. When her shift ended, another transfer from Lance hit her phone. If it stayed like this every day, life would be wonderful. She replied in high spirits. Since you're keeping your promise, I'll get you some good food, reward, and motivation. Keep going. More than an hour later, a message blinked back. Got it. Charlie hesitated, a flicker of guilt. Maybe she'd pushed him too hard, 2 straight days of heavy labor. He must have had a rough time. That day, Lance didn't go to the hospital. He was buried in work at the company. The Hardwick Group's internal system had been hacked. The intruder hadn't taken a penny, but they'd swapped Lance's profile photo for a dog's head. They'd messed with the bull, and the bull wasn't going to let it slide. Worse, it was some scruffy mutt's head. It trashed Lance's imposing image. Have you found the hacker? We're still searching. Under this time pressure, it isn't easy. So it's easy to crack our system, but hard to fix it? Lance's voice iced over. I tell you to recover it. You say it's difficult. I tell you to find the source, and you can't even get me an IP. Aaron swallowed and turned away, barking at the tech team to move faster. Someone had done the swap deliberately. The tension in the office was thick enough to choke on. The next morning, Aaron strode in to report. Mr. Hardwick, we found the hacker's IP. It's pinging from Grandview Kindergarten. Lance frowned. What kind of grudge would a kindergarten have with him? Who did it? Aaron hesitated. According to the data, a 5-year-old child. A 5-year-old? Aaron never brought him anything that hadn't been triple-checked. It was true. Lance had been ready to drag the mastermind out by the collar and teach him a lesson, only to find out it was a 5-year-old's prank. What was he supposed to do with that? Get in touch with the school, he said at last. I want to see the kid in person. Lance was baffled. Why would a child he'd never met look at him with such hate? What on earth had he done? Grandview Kindergarten. In the office, an adult and a child sat face to face on the sofa, both staring each other down, neither willing to blink, let alone admit defeat. The dean and Aaron stood to the side, watching. The longer they looked, the more alike the two seemed. The little boy was a miniature Mr. Hardwick, right down to that unshakable, noble air you couldn't fake. The child's hostility was palpable. He lifted his chin, eyes frosted. What are you looking for me for? That voice, cold, far too old for his age, made everyone present break into a nervous sweat. Aaron swallowed hard, terrified Mr. Hardwick would throw the child out. Why did you change my photo? He didn't wait for an answer. Don't pretend you don't know. You started it. You made things difficult for my mother. She works herself to the bone every day, and you still bully her. I'm here to teach you a lesson, for her. If anyone else had said that, Lance would have been furious. Instead, curiosity tugged at him. He was buried in work all day. When would he have time to provoke a married woman? The kid must have mistaken him for someone else. I think you've mistaken me for another man, he said calmly. Seeing Lance refuse to admit anything, the boy's anger flared. I've been to my mother's workplace. You're the boss, Lance Hardwick. He even used his full name. No mistake. He was here for Lance. Lance studied the bold child, a spark of interest in his eyes. All right, bring your mother here. I'd like to meet the woman I've supposedly been bullying. That knocked some of the wind out of him. His mother worked day and night. How could he drag her here? If she found out he'd caused trouble, she'd scold him for sure. Since we're both guys, there's no need to involve her, the boy said, steady and firm. This is between you and me. Don't drag others in. Lance couldn't help it. He admired the nerve. Newborn calves aren't afraid of tigers. Clearly, this one wasn't. Fine. Since you said so, let's have a battle. We'll see who can break into my new company system first. If I win, you stop bullying my mother. And if you lose? It's impossible for me to lose, the boy replied, absolute confidence in every syllable. Lance glanced at him again. 5 years old, and that arrogant. He needed to be taught his place, humbled a little. Aaron hurried to set up 2 computers with matching specs and network speed. He rattled off the rules, simple, clear, and then stepped back. The duel began. Fingers flew. Screens flashed. Their movements mirrored each other so closely that the room fell silent, everyone holding their breath for fear of breaking the fragile focus between them. Ding! One system fell. A second ding followed, just a few seconds behind. The boy wiped sweat from his brow. A few seconds late, still a loss. He was only 5 and not yet truly fluent with a keyboard, but compared to his peers, he was a genius. Lance stood, the appreciation in his eyes unmistakable now. There were precious few in the world who could nearly match him, let alone a child. This child's future was promising. Seeing the disappointment in Shane's eyes, Lance felt an unexpected tug of sympathy. A faint smile softened his serious face. Shane's stomach twisted. If he lost, would his mother get in trouble? He lowered his head. I lost. He braced for ridicule, but Lance's voice came calm, even generous. You didn't lose. You're just young and still catching up. Give it a couple of years, and I might not be your opponent anymore. The room went still. The others stared, stunned. Mr. Hardwick encouraging a kid he didn't even know? They'd braced for a storm, for blood on the floor, and nothing happened. Lance's gaze slid to the principal. The man fidgeted, flustered for no reason. He didn't have the chops to be a hacker, let alone to go head-to-head with Mr. Hardwick. Take good care of this child. He has a bright future. With that, Lance turned and left. He didn't press the hacker investigation, didn't pry into the boy's situation. As soon as the big shot walked out, the room exhaled as one. In the car, Lance gave Aaron a single look. Aaron had been with him for years, no words needed. He pulled up Shane's file and handed it over. Lance skimmed the page. His brow lifted. Carly Chambers? Is he Carly's adopted son? A hint of disappointment flickered across Lance's face as he read on. Shane was the son of Brandon Wilson, a Chinese immigrant. Half a year ago, Carly had submitted an adoption application. Lance studied the details, then a playful smile tugged at his mouth. In Peace Point Hospital. Carly scrubbed the glass, shoulders tight, breath fogging the pain. That was when Rihanna told her she was assigned to clean the chairman's office. Of course, what she feared most. The one person she never wanted to see, the perverted chairman. No matter how reluctant, she had to follow orders. She pushed open the office door. No one in sight, but water ran in the lounge. Was that pervert taking a shower? Seriously? She looked around. The office was spotless. Nothing here needed a janitor. She was halfway to the door when a low voice drifted from the lounge. Bring in the bathrobe. Her temples throbbed. Great. She was the only one here, so he was talking to her. She had no choice. She stepped in. The bathrobe lay folded on the bed. No one in the lounge itself. Why couldn't Lance come out and get it himself? Men, Oh, so troublesome. She glanced toward the bathroom. The door stood half open. Water spattered over the threshold, slicking the tiles. Pervert. Why are you still standing there? Do you want me to get it myself? Lance's tone held a thread of impatience. Annoyance prickled up her spine. Carly snatched the robe and started forward, only for the trailing hem to catch under her shoe. Ah. She pitched forward, stumbling toward the bathroom. Lance turned at the sound, just in time to see her fall at his feet. She scrambled up, lifting the robe like a shield, then froze. Lance, usually all sharp lines and cold distance, stood with wet hair dripping over his brow, the severity rinsed from his features. Water traced the cords of his neck. Below, perfect eight-pack abs, the hard line of a V disappearing beneath a bath towel. Carly's face went hot. Are you a pervert? You sneak into my bathroom and call me the pervert? His gaze cut to her, amused and cool. Don't be so full of yourself. Why would I peek at you? Her voice wobbled. She flung the robe toward him and spun for the door. The floor betrayed her. Too slick. She skidded, flailed, her elbow hit the shower lever, and a burst of cold spray slapped her face. She gasped and jerked back, straight into Lance's chest. She went rigid. Oh God, kill me now. From above, his voice dropped, warm, teasing, dangerous. In such a hurry to throw yourself into my arms? You must be in need of a man, right? His eyes burned as they swept over her, heat simmering in the quiet. Run, Carly. Run now. She felt like a little lamb pinned under a hungry wolf's stare. His eyes, dark, intent, looked ready to swallow her whole. Carly clutched her chest, fear prickling under her skin. She couldn't tell if Lance was teasing, or if there was something darker in his eyes. Mr. Hardwick, what are you going to do? She asked, barely above a whisper. He pressed her into the corner, a playful smile curving his mouth. He leaned in and breathed warm air over her neck. She trembled. Since you couldn't wait to come to me, I should lend a helping hand, shan't I? Otherwise, would I still be a man if I refused? I didn't mean to offer myself to you, Carly blurted. Rihanna told me to clean the office. Then you suddenly asked me to get you a bathrobe. I slipped. That's why the door flew open when I fell. That's clear enough now, isn't it? Grey Devil, please, let me go. But now that you've seen me naked, what do you think I should do? She shook her head hard. What do you mean I saw you naked? I saw nothing. Oh? You saw nothing? I didn't see you topless. The words tumbled out wrong, and she nearly bit her tongue. He still didn't let her go. The heat in his eyes cooled, the playful edge gone, once more the king of hell, cold and unreadable. His scrutinizing gaze sent chills down her spine. In that case, he said softly, you can die to atone for your sins. Carly stared, stunned. She hadn't done anything heinous. Why talk about death? Anger cut through the fear. She glared at him, snapped the shower lever, and let a sheet of cold water crash over his face. While Lance wiped his eyes, she bolted from the chairman's office. At the door, she nearly collided with Aaron, who was bringing a document. He glanced at her, puzzled. Before he could ask a thing, she was already sprinting past him. She ran straight to the locker room. Her hands shook. The thought of being cornered, humiliated, and toyed with by that pervert made her throat burn. Tears pricked. "Don't cry, don't you dare." She yanked out her phone and typed a message to the gangster. "Did you take the job?" 10 minutes crawled by. She took a breath and texted again. "I heard you take jobs beating people up. I have one. If you take it, you can keep next week's salary. What do you say?" 5 minutes. Nothing. He was probably working, phone buried in a pocket. She was about to put hers away when a notification chimed. "Who is it?" Since coming back to the little city, she had no one. Not a single friend. The Chambers would never help her. Other than the 2 kids, he was the only person she dared to trust. "He's the chairman of Peace Point Hospital. He's a pervert. He wants my life just because he failed to bully me." Lance would never have guessed he was such a villain in Carly's mind. He hadn't even had time to blame her for the scene in his office, and she was the one aggrieved? Was that how she saw it? "That's a big shot you're talking about," came the reply. "I can't afford to offend him." "I knew you'd chicken out," she muttered, jabbing at the screen. "I bet you're too much of a coward to take this. Fine, I'll find someone else. Don't tell me there's no one who can touch that damned pervert." A moment later, another message popped up. "I'd like to give you a piece of advice. Don't provoke him. That's your best option." Carly's temper snapped. She wanted to smash the phone, but she couldn't afford a new one. She settled for a few choice curses, then tossed it onto the bench and pressed her fist to her eyes. "In the chairman's office." Aaron stood at the door, apologetic. "Mr. Hardwick, I told the department head to have Miss Chambers clean the office, but I forgot to mention the time, after hours. Hence the misunderstanding today. I'm sorry." Lance toweled water from his hair, a helpless smile tugging at his mouth. So bold. She even wanted to find someone to deal with him in private. He really had angered her. "Mr. Hardwick, this is my mistake," Aaron went on. "Dr. Chambers will probably think you're making trouble for her again. Then there'll be a big misunderstanding. Do you think she'll get her position back by then?" "What do you mean by again?" Lance's gaze sharpened. "Even you think I'm setting her up on purpose?" Aaron swallowed. From the outside, Mr. Hardwick's focus on Carly lately looked abnormal. He didn't dare say it. "Mr. Hardwick, I believe you didn't do it on purpose," he replied carefully. Aaron felt like a little genius. In this way, not only did he avoid embarrassing Mr. Hardwick, he also showed his loyalty. 2 birds with 1 stone. However, his babbling was as useful as playing dumb. Lance cut him a cold glance, and Aaron shut up at once. To be honest, Lance didn't dislike Carly. He only wanted to do something, anything, to catch her attention. As for why he was doing it, he wasn't sure either. He lifted his gaze to the window, studying the view. An unfamiliar smile tugged at his lips. All afternoon, Carly turned the big devil's words over in her head. First, he'd wanted her as a janitor. Now he wanted her life? How many vicious tricks could that devil come up with to deal with her? She was an honest employee. Even if she boasted about teaching Lance a lesson, it was just talk. Face to face, she probably wouldn't do a thing. While she was lamenting her miserable luck, Rihanna came sprinting over, panting, arms windmilling, desperate to speak. "Rihanna, what's wrong with you? Calm down. What's up?" Rihanna gulped air and steadied herself, eyes shining. "There's a new notice on the bulletin board." It says you're being. Carly's heart lurched. Fired? A notice. On the bulletin board. Did Lance really enjoy humiliating her in public? She forced her voice even. Rihanna, say it slowly. I can take it. And thank you for looking out for me these past weeks. Even if I have to leave, I'll remember your kindness. Rihanna blinked, then grinned and grabbed her hand. Dr. Chambers, don't talk like that. I'm not letting you go because you're getting your position back. It's all in the bulletin. Get ready to see patients tomorrow. Make sure you've got everything prepped in advance. Carly wondered if she'd misheard. Are you serious? Of course. Rihanna nodded hard and pointed toward the hall. If you don't believe me, I'll take you to see it. They hurried to the bulletin board. Carly scanned the notice carefully, black and white, clear as day. She was reinstated. Was the devil changing for the better? Or was this just another way to torture her? Whatever came next, she would endure it for the children. She turned to Rihanna and bowed her head. Thank you for taking care of me. If you ever run into trouble, I'll be there for you. The janitor's schedule didn't match the white-collar shifts. She'd been missing kindergarten pickups. Rihanna had been arranging them for her. Rihanna shook her head. Dr. Chambers, you're the pride of our department. We'll back you all the way. I believe in you. You will be an excellent doctor. Warmth spread through Carly's chest. She nodded, steady. Don't worry. I won't let anyone down. Let the big devil see it clearly. She was fully capable of this position. When Carly returned to neurology, Mr. Jeffers had a new desk waiting for her and 2 fresh sets of work clothes. 100 emotions rose at once. God, it hadn't been easy. Mr. Jeffers addressed the room. Let's give a round of applause and welcome Dr. Chambers back to our department. Starting tomorrow, she officially resumes work with us. Everyone, please offer her a warm welcome and a helping hand if needed. Carly nodded over and over. Thank you, Mr. Jeffers, and thank you, everyone, for your support. I'll do my best and won't let anyone down. One of the doctors sighed under his breath. It's a miracle Dr. Chambers escaped the devil boss. Carly's smile faltered. Right, she'd almost forgotten. Besides patients, she still had to face that super troublesome devil. Mr. Jeffers shot the doctor a warning look. The man clamped his mouth shut. Even so, as long as she was back at the work she loved, Carly felt certain she could overcome anything. Mr. Jeffers took good care of her and told her to take the rest of the day off to prepare for tomorrow. Carly called a car and went to pick up her children. Her heart was a mess. Lance, that big devil, kept slipping into her thoughts. She felt an indescribable pull toward him, a familiarity that shouldn't exist. I must be out of my mind. She patted her cheeks. No matter how good his body looks, it doesn't change the fact he's a pervert. If I get close to someone as dangerous as him, I won't even know how I die. Let out. The moment Carly saw her babies, the big devil vanished from her mind. The children spotted her and ran over laughing. Carly scooped them both up, grinning. I'm the first one today. Didn't I do a good job? Sherry kissed her, eyes shining. Mom's the best. From now on, can you be the first to pick us up? Oh, Sherry. Carly put on a serious face. I'm usually busy with work. I'll try my best to pick you up, but I can't promise I'll always be the first. Okay? She wanted to make it clear now, better than letting them feel disappointed later. Shane slipped his hand into hers and rubbed his cheek against it. He was usually aloof, rarely this cuddly. "What's going on?" She smoothed his hair, puzzled. "Shane, what's wrong?" He shook his head and leaned into her. "I missed you at school." "It's not easy, huh?" Carly wrapped them both in a hug and took a steady breath. "Since I'm in such a good mood today, let's have pizza for dinner. And I'll make dessert when we get home. How about that?" Sherry's voice turned sing-song. "Mom, I want chocolate pie. You have to make it for me this time." Before she could answer, Shane frowned. "Too much chocolate isn't good for you. How about juice instead? It's healthy." Sherry pouted, then nodded, reluctant but obedient. As long as she was with Mom and her brother, she was happy with anything. She was still so little. All she cared about was what to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and making sure she had enough. Holding both their hands, Carly took them to the bus stop. On the way, her phone buzzed a new message. Another day's salary had arrived. He really was responsible, sending her pay every day, and the amount kept going up. If he kept covering the care expenses on time and with her own salary added in, she could give the kids a better life. The ugliness at the hospital earlier faded from her mind. She smiled and announced, "Kids, let's have seafood tonight. Mommy's about to make good money. Let's treat ourselves, shall we?" She couldn't always scrimp on food and shortchange them. Every now and then, they deserved a proper meal. Sherry clapped, delighted at the promise of a feast. Beside her, Shane studied Carly, calm and thoughtful. He'd been worried these past 2 days. But she'd gotten off work early. She was even smiling. It seemed that strange man wasn't giving her trouble anymore. "Mom, if someone bullies you in the future, don't keep it in your heart. Tell me, and I'll deal with him." Carly didn't read the deeper meaning. She only heard her son trying to protect her, and warmth filled her chest. "Shane, I hope you treat your friends like that too. Be enthusiastic and generous, and you'll make more good friends." "As long as I have you and my sister, that's enough." He slipped back into his usual cool tone. He could tell she was about to lecture him, so he pretended not to hear. This child really gave Carly a headache. Every day he wore that frosty look, and the other kids kept their distance. She hoped he'd grow more cheerful as he got older. Or was it a sensitive heart turning into something more? Carly found herself wondering if she should take her son for a psychological checkup. Early in the morning, Carly took the 2 children to kindergarten. She strained her shoulders, drew a steady breath, and told herself, new job, face it head on. When she reached the hospital hall, her name glowed on the electronic board. Dr. Carly Chambers, neurology, and a quiet joy warmed her chest. Finally, a chance to prove herself. But the morning wasn't what she'd imagined. Peace Point Hospital was crowded, the neurology wing overflowing, just not with her patients. Other consulting rooms buzzed with voices, hers sat empty. Even Mr. Jeffers didn't bother hovering over the department today. "Dr. Chambers, don't be discouraged," Mr. Jeffers said, pausing at her doorway. "The hospital's reputation is strong. You're new and young. Most patients prefer seasoned doctors. It's normal for them to doubt at first. Give it time. It will get better." Carly nodded, helpless and grateful all at once. "Thank you for the encouragement, Mr. Jeffers. Don't worry, I'll persevere." After he left, she drifted to the doorway and watched the other rooms. Patients who looked anxious, impatient, even desperate filed in to see someone else. No one even glanced her way. Her chest tightened with a quiet, unspeakable disappointment. She sighed and sat back down. From the corner, someone watched. She settled in, still and silent, not even in the mood to pick up the book on her desk. It felt like her first day would just evaporate. Suddenly, a nurse popped her head in. "Dr. Chambers, you have a patient. Get ready. I'll fetch Mr. Jeffers." That the nurse was gone. Before long, an elderly man shuffled in, supported by two family members. He looked to be in his late 50s or 60s, his hair stark white, his face drawn tight with pain. He was her first patient. Her spine straightened, every nerve sharpened. The old man took one look at the young woman waiting in the consulting room and hesitated, doubt flickering across his features. "Really?" his son snapped. "The staff outside told us there was an expert here. One look and I can tell she's just a fresh graduate. Are you planning to practice on my father's life?" "That's right," another family member chimed in. "I'm filing a complaint. An intern, unsupervised. Do you think we're fools? We want another doctor." The others nodded, faces set and wary. None of them believed Carly had what it took. The old man grimaced, helpless in their grip, and they began to turn him around, guiding him back out without giving Carly a word. Carly wasn't someone who quit. Not today. Not now. She stepped forward, blocking their path. "Wait." Before the old man could react, she gently took his wrist, fingers settling on his pulse. His eyes widened in surprise as she met his gaze, studying the subtle tremor at the corner of his lids, the way he held his head. "How long have the headaches been waking you?" she asked softly. "And the dizziness? Worse at night?" "Hey," the daughter snapped, pushing at Carly's shoulder. "What do you think you're doing? Getting handsy because we don't want to see you?" "I'm not a saint," the son growled, stepping in. "Don't think I won't hit you just because you're a woman. If you hurt my father today, I'll make you pay for it." Carly didn't flinch. She kept her voice steady. "I can tell what's wrong with your father." Their faces shifted, skepticism wobbling into alarm. In the past, every doctor had buried their father in test before saying a word. And this woman dared to call it after a glance and a pulse? "The patient has a serious cerebral hemorrhage," Carly said plainly. "He often has headaches, doesn't he? His eyes are whiter than usual. He's been losing sleep and feeling dizzy." She lifted her gaze to the son. "Based on his symptoms, he must have been paralyzed for a period of time, right?" Silence fell. Hard. Everything she said hit the mark. She hadn't even seen his medical history. The son clutched the medical record, breath catching. His voice came out rough, almost disbelieving. "How did you know that? We're not locals. The documents haven't even been submitted yet." Carly met their eyes and said, steady and sincere, "I'm a neurologist. I majored in neurology after med school. I'm familiar with all kinds of treatments, and I'm confident I can help my patients. I'll take responsibility for skipping any unnecessary checkups." When he breathes, he coughs. The echo indicates an infection in the bronchus. He also has hypertension. I can feel it in his pulse. Conditions like that need early treatment. She'd trained herself to read pulses from the start, to spare patients needless tests and get them straight to a diagnosis, straight to care. People often doubted her, young, a woman. Once they saw her work, doubt gave way to something close to awe. The siblings' attitude changed at once. Can you really cure my father's illness? Carly patted her chest and promised, his condition is still mild enough to cure. As long as he cooperates, I promise I can cure him. Because of that promise, hope sparked. The whole family followed her back into the consulting room. At the doorway, Aaron finally exhaled. He'd worried the patient would refuse Carly outright, but her skill held them in place. Mr. Hardwick, Dr. Chambers has quite a few tricks up her sleeve. Lance glanced toward the consulting room, a faint, disdainful smile tugging at his mouth. This is just the beginning. Don't draw conclusions too early. Aaron knew him, cold on the surface, warm underneath. He ribbed Carly constantly, but he paid attention. He cared. Seeing her side quiet, Aaron had quietly routed new walk-ins to her. No appointment, no fanfare, just a chance. Dr. Chambers is modest and polite, and she can read a pulse. Maybe she'll be the hospital's gold signboard one day. Lance's gaze slid back to Carly. He couldn't help it. This woman's performance, it exceeded expectations. Opportunities favor the prepared. Even if Carly reclaimed her old position, she'd have to prove she deserved it. The start is always the hardest. After that first patient, the rest were less resistant. Even Mr. Jeffers, helping from the side, found himself impressed. She moved through patients with crisp efficiency, and her accuracy, easily over 90%, made him understand why the director had invited her in the first place. There were only a few patients that afternoon, but for Carly it was a good start. The first old gentleman had already been admitted. Carly would follow up and treat him continuously. She was confident she could cure him. With a little time left before the end of her shift and no more patients waiting, she pulled out a small notebook and began sorting the treatment plan. She was stacking documents when her phone rang. She checked the screen, the foreman from the construction site. Confused, she picked up. Hello? What's the matter? Miss Chambers, Laith Studwick, the one you introduced, was injured when a brick fell on his head at the site. What? Carly shot to her feet. Leith had been handing over his wages on time lately. She couldn't ignore that. I'll be right there. She packed up fast and headed out, pausing only to request leave from Mr. Jeffers. Enemies meet on narrow roads. As the elevator door slid open, she walked straight into the one person she didn't want to see. Lance stood inside, face cold, Aaron just behind him. In this entire hospital, only Carly dared to barge into his path. She was in a rush. She didn't have time to spar with the devil. She ducked her head, tugged her hair forward, and covered her ears like it could make her invisible. Maybe he wouldn't notice. But how could a 1.9-meter tall man miss the little turtle huddled in the corner? Lance saw her head to toe. Don't speak, she begged herself. Even if the big devil sees me, don't speak. Just ignore me. The next second, Lance's voice cut through the hum of the elevator. It's working hours. Where are you going with your purse? Carly frowned. This was personal. How was she supposed to explain it to the big devil? Even if she did, would he believe her? When she didn't answer, Lance's tone cooled further. I bet you're just slacking off trying to call it a day early. Disappointment shadowed his eyes. He'd given her a chance, and he thought she didn't appreciate it.